Unfortunately, the modern educational system is being very materialistic and does not uh, give any sort of education or teaching about spiritual life. They do not teach about they don't give even a hint or a clue about such things. So the first and most important point about education is that we must have complete clarity about the goal or the objective of education. When the very goal and objective of life itself is Krishna consciousness, then naturally education should be seen as a process to achieve that goal. So it is not only for children, it is also for adults and elderly people. Education does not end with the school or college. Education is a continuing process that goes on till the very end of life. So, and naturally, in the formal stages of education, when we're in the stage of being children, we have to go through the formative years of our education, through the school and even in higher education. It is very important to have that clarity of the goal or the objective. So the fundamental flaw in the modern educational system is that it does not have a clue of the ultimate objective or goal of education, which is Krishna consciousness. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada actually called it like a spiritual slaughterhouse. So keeping in mind that this is the first and most important aspect of education, that spiritual knowledge must be given, and the children must eventually be inspired, encouraged, trained to render some devotional service to Krishna. Now, to what degree we must persuade them, how it must be presented, it must not be forced on them. They must be made to experience it in a very joyful way. That is another matter. That is the matter of the methodology or the manner in which we give them Krishna consciousness. That requires also some intelligence and sensitivity. But the fundamental point is that the goal of education must be very clear. So this is the first and most important part of education, whether it is modern, given in a modern format or in a traditional format. This is very important. But now the point arises that is it so easy or quick to achieve this goal? Can we become Krishna consciousness just overnight? No, it is not possible. It requires a lifetime of education and cultivation. So it is not easy. It requires a lot of training. It requires a conducive atmosphere. It requires adoption of certain kinds of attitudes and mindsets and values, of lifestyles. It needs a support structure. In other words, it needs an entire culture. So this is the second aspect of education, which is the culture. And what do we mean by culture? We mean that support structure or that environment that promotes enlightened human values and divine values, like, for example, kindness, forgiveness, simplicity, austerity, honesty, cleanliness, and so on, that we find in Bhagavad Gita and in the other Vedic scriptures. So any culture that essentially promotes these kinds of values creates a very conducive culture where spiritual life can be practiced in childhood and also in maturity when the children grow up. The understanding of these human values of the kind that I just mentioned depends on how they're understood from Vedic literature. For example, the term cleanliness may be understood in one way in the general outside world, but we have a much deeper understanding of cleanliness. Similarly, with kindness, with mercy, austerity, each of these terms are very deep. They are not to be superficially understood. So therefore, we see that in the Bhagavad Gita purports and also in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada on occasion appropriately elaborately discusses each of these terms so that we understand what they mean. So culture means to promote these kinds of enlightened human values and also promote the conduct and lifestyle that is based on these values. So our behavior and lifestyle, our habits and our speech, our thought process, everything, including how we relate to each other as human beings, our dealings with each other, how we deal with elders, with peers, with those who are younger than us, how we deal with the world outside, with the environment. All of these things will come in the category of what we can call culture, broadly speaking, including development of character. So this is the second feature of education. So there are many schools that also imbibe character in terms of discipline, in terms of politeness, etc. They do many things, which is good. It is better to have these qualities than to not have them at all. At the same time, because they are not connected to the Vedic scripture, so they're not able to give a higher spiritual understanding to these values. So therefore, when we imbibe culture into the educational system, we would like to give it that spiritual and that devotional touch, that devotional flavor that is very much essential. So therefore, we see that culture is the second most important element of education. And also, importantly, culture will also include how we organize our society, how we live amongst each other. So what kind of pattern, what kind of formula do you have for organizing the society as a whole? So these are very important points. So the first point was bhakti, was the principle of Krishna consciousness. The second point is the culture that is required to eventually attain that goal, and which will also help us to interact with the world properly. So now, in modern day education, we hardly have anything of the first part, the first essential point. We have maybe something of this second point, and we identify the third part, which is academics, to be all in all in terms of education. So people equate education with academics, with science, geography, history, mathematics, languages, and they think that this is all education is about. But as I mentioned earlier, that is not the case. Education will include these things, yes. Certainly, our children must learn languages. They must learn basic arithmetic and even more. They must learn history. They must learn geography. They must learn so many things. But it is not enough to learn that. And because somebody has got some very high degrees in a college in any of these fields of science and technology or geography, history, it doesn't mean that they are truly educated. So this third part of education, academics, is necessary but not sufficient to be called education. And academics must also include life skills and practical understanding of the world. And as they grow up, the children are more and more, shall we say, acquainted with how one can earn one's livelihood. That is also a very important point in this world because people must earn their livelihood and they must be educated and trained to do that. There are various forms of earning one's livelihood. And at a certain point in the educational system, when the children are older, they will be moved into some form of system or education where they are prepared for their future livelihood. So there will also be theoretical classes here, and there will be practical classes also. Modern day schools don't do much of the practical things. Maybe some do, but many don't. It is just a question of going to the class, learning some tables, learning some arithmetic, learning some languages, learning some academic subjects and coming out. Maybe a few games at the end of it, that is all. But very few will actually have classes that deal with not only these subjects, but also, let us say, practical hands-on activities like learning agriculture, learning cow protection, learning gardening, learning pottery, learning many practical skills of this world. What to speak of the devotional skills and the cultural skills that are essential. So academics, therefore, is an important part, but it is only one part of education. So when you have these three parts together, the part of devotional service or bhakti, the second part of a favorable culture by introducing the spiritual elements into it, and the third of academics, then we have complete education. Now, as far as academics are concerned, we certainly teach what the other schools teach, but there may be also occasion for us to um, teach them these subjects or certain portions of these subjects from a Krishna conscious point of view. We may give certain devotional perspectives when we are studying any of these subjects, and that is a topic in itself. And for those of you who are already involved in education as teachers, whether in the school or at home teaching your children, this will be a very important point. Apart from giving the secular knowledge, there may be good occasions when you can give a devotional perspective and make people or make the children see Krishna, for example, in the different activities of the world. How Krishna has organized this world in such a beautiful way. How Krishna's management of this thing is so perfect. So when they start appreciating nature and Krishna's role in that, their appreciation for devotional service will also increase. And they will get a very deep understanding of the world around them. In other words, we are speaking of a very holistic form of education. This, in brief, is our understanding of blending Vedic culture and modern academics. However, there are certain other points that need to be also clarified. And that is that education is not only what one learns within the classroom in the schools. One must make a distinction between formal education and informal education. Formal education is what children learn in a classroom or in a school. So they learn all the subjects. There may be a board, there may be textbooks, there may be examinations, etc. So that is a formal education. But a very large part of the education is informal education, which happens outside the classroom, which happens at home, which happens amongst friends, which happens amongst relatives, amongst the society at large. That form of education, that form of input that the children receive is a very important part of what that child will become when he or she grows up. So generally, there is a tendency that parents think that we have sent our children to the school and our job is over. And now it's a very good school. And even if it is a devotionally inclined school, they think that now our job is over, our child is gone to the school, and the teachers will give us the end product. Our child will come out from the school, blazing with effulgence, spiritual effulgence, and will become an extraordinary personality. Our role as parents, as responsible members of the society, is also very important in educating the children. So, a significant portion of the child's worldview and knowledge and thought process is influenced by sources that are outside the school. So when we speak of education, we must include all these sources. And therefore, there is a popular saying, even in the West, that it takes a village to raise a child. So it is not only the matter of one school, not even the matter of the family, but it is the village at large, which means the society outside that is responsible to groom the children in a certain way. So many times we hear devotees saying, oh, our child is getting spoiled because of bad association in the building or in the neighborhood or in the school. Yes, this is a very common problem. So it goes to show that education is an all-inclusive process in which the school plays a very crucial part, but it is not the only component in the educational system. There is a subhashita. Subhashita means a proverb in Sanskrit. It appears in some commentaries on some Dharma Shastras and also some commentaries on the Mahabharata, but it is a well-known subhashita. And I thought it might be interesting for us to just hear it. So the shloka is Acharya Padam Adatte Padam Shishya Swamedhaya Padam Asabhrahmacharibhyaha Padam Kala Kramena Cha. The word Padam here means to a part of it. Usually it means a quarter. Just like a shloka has 4 lines. Now each is called a quarter or a pada. So in this shloka it is said, Padam Adatte, the child obtains 1/4 of the knowledge of whatever he or she knows from the acharyas. The acharyas means the teachers. Now we can broaden that understanding to include the other teachers in the child's life, like the parents, the elders. They also teach the child so many things. So 25% of what we know, we have learned from our acharyas. Then the next is Padam Shishya Swamedhaya. 25% of what we know has also been understood by our own intelligence. So we think about something, we have learned so many things, we observe so many things, then we reflect on it, we analyze it. And in this way, we also study books from here and there. So we gather our own knowledge, our own conclusions, we analyze things with our intelligence. So 25% of what we know depends on our own intelligence. So Padam Shishya Swamedhaya. Medha means intelligence. Medhaya means by intelligence. Swa means self. Then the next point is Padam Sa Brahmacharibhyaha. Because in the Gurukul, the students were called brahmacharis. In other words, 25% of what we know, 25% of our opinions, our worldviews, our mentalities, etc., are imbibed by the association of fellow students. Peer pressure, we all know how people get into bad habits or even good habits, actually, by association. So the power of association of people of the same age, of children of the same age in school, is very, very great. So therefore, what kind of company are we going to keep for our children? So when parents happily send their children to the best known prestigious international schools and other kinds of places, they must keep in mind the 25% of what they're going to learn from their fellow students who come from a certain background. And they may be very, very critical of the children's devotional inclinations. They may make fun of them, etc. And even the teachers. I remember, for example, in the school that I went to as a child, we had a history teacher, and I still remember very clearly. He was a history teacher, and he was an atheist. And in class, in history class, he would never lose an opportunity to criticize Vedic culture. And he would speak in such a strong way and say that, I don't believe in the Vedas. He would say that. So that influenced us as children, you see, because at a very impressionable age, and you hear all these things. And many of the friends in the class may have been also like that, of that kind of a mentality. So therefore, our worldview and our understanding and knowledge of opinions on life also will depend 25% on our fellow companions in school and college and also in life. And finally, Padam Kala Kramena Cha. The remaining 25% of our knowledge of how we acquire knowledge and what opinions we form, etc., depends on the passage of time. Kala Kramena Cha. Passage of time indicates our experience. We go out into the world, we experience so many things, we experience the knocks of life. Nobody in this world can experience life without getting knocked. We get knocked. Everybody gets knocked. It's like a churning process. So we go through many difficult experiences in life. This material world, as Krishna says, is not a sukhalayam. It is a dukkhalayam. But the intelligent person derives valuable life lessons from these knocks that he or she gets in life. And we use that adversity as an opportunity to advance. So we learn. So even failures become stepping stones to success. Failures become an opportunity to learn and experience things and understand things better. So that is why we say, that experience is so important in life. Experience brings maturity. Experience gives us a certain very enlightened view of things. When one is very young, one may be very passionate about things. When one grows older, one realizes, no, kala kramena cha, but passage of time, we learn many lessons. So in this way, our understanding and education has many participants. And eventually, when we grow up with experience, we reflect on what we have learned. So what we are taught in childhood will be the foundation on which our churning will go on inside us. Our education, our intelligence, our reflection, analysis will churn. So the foundational years of education are very crucial. And if we do this part very nicely, then even if the child goes out and has bad association, he or she will be able to overcome the bad association on the strength of the very strong foundation that has been given in the early days. Now, another thing that I want to mention about the Vedic model, since we are speaking about how to blend Vedic culture into the modern academics, is that the Vedic model of education is a very personalized model. Today, in most schools and colleges, we find a very large number of students per class. And in many cases, the teacher does not even know the names of the students, or does not remember the names of every student. And it is very difficult to give personal attention to each child. So the children also are in their own world, the teachers are also in their own world. And because everything has become so materialistic, the whole model of modern education is very commercially oriented. So the teachers also have lost that spirit of sacrificing themselves to teach the children. So they become also commercial minded. They come there just for the salary and they go away. They're not very much interested in really making the children grow into wonderful human beings. The Vedic model, however, had a very personal touch between the acharyas and the students. Very often, the students lived in the house of the guru. And the guru and the guru patni, if it was a grihastha, would look after them like their own children. And the children would participate in the household activities, in the ashram activities, help in cooking, in cleaning, in gathering fuel. And there would also be the proper educational activities that would go on, the academic activities of learning from the shastras and so on. But this cooking, cleaning, serving, etc., was also very much part of the education. So this very warm and close bond that been built up between the teachers and the children. And so it was like a family atmosphere. It was not a very formal, structured thing that is there today in the modern schools. And even the disciplining, it was a very creative system. There are two aspects to the Vedic system. One is the memorizing system, and the other is the analytical, creative part of the Vedic model. In the memorizing part, it was very essential for the children to memorize many, many things. And that is one reason why modern educationists or people criticize traditional education, because they say that it was only for rote learning, for rote memorization. And that actually students should be given a very creative and analytical ability. Now, it is not that the creative or analytical ability in the Vedic system did not exist, but the Vedic system also appreciated the importance of memorizing the right kind of things. Because in the childhood, one's ability to memorize is very sharp, very strong. Children can pick up things very quickly. And therefore, when they memorize things in childhood, even if they didn't understand certain shlokas and so on, for example, but they would get imprinted in the mind. And as and when they grew and there was maturity and they learned more with experience, whatever they had learned began to internally flower out and blossom in their consciousness. And what was earlier only rote learning now actually blossomed into something very sublime, into experienced understanding of those shlokas that they learned. So therefore, don't worry that the children are not able to understand everything. In large part, many things have to be learned by heart in the proper way, and then they will become very meaningful to the children as they grow older in age. Just like we learned our tables when we were arithmetic tables when we were young, and probably we did not like to learn it. But if we have learned them in properly in childhood, even today, you can see the value. You want to do some calculations, and immediately you remember your childhood tables. They become so meaningful now. This is just a mundane example. Similarly, for the shlokas that we learn, they all become very meaningful and they blossom out into our consciousness. At the same time, there was a lot of creativity and analytical ability that the children developed because of the way they were trained in that abode. There was a lot of flexibility in what the gurus taught in the Gurukulas. It wasn't always like a rigid syllabus. There was a lot of spontaneity. There was a lot of hands-on work. There was a lot of interaction with Mother Nature. There were a lot of spiritual activities that were done. So all of these eventually combined to form such a complete, perfect, and holistic and integrated model of knowledge. So those who were products of that educational system emerged as complete human beings who were ready to understand the goal of life and eventually moved on to do very, very useful things in the society in whatever profession, etc., that they chose. And then they were also able to perfect their lives spiritually. They also became very pure devotees of the Lord in course of time. So this is an ideal kind of a model where we blend academic education with everything that the Vedic culture stands for in terms of the correct spiritual understanding. So it is exactly 11:50 now. So I will stop because this was the time for my lecture.